Hey, what's up guys? Sam from Cubeye Studios here, and today I'm bringing you another deck recipe. Now, if there's one thing I am known for in the Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube community, whatever you really want to call it, is just how bad I am at Yu-Gi-Oh! In this game. But other than that, I'm also pretty well known for two decks that I like to use a lot. I'm a very big fan of my Spellcaster deck, which if you haven't checked out the deck recipe I've posted for that already, you can do so here somewhere. I'll put an annotation up, or the link will be in the description somewhere. Anyway, I'm also very well known for an alien deck that I really like to use, and I might be one of the only people who uses it because it's unique, I guess, and not super meta. But anyway, I thought I would go over all of the cards in the deck, talk about it a little bit, give you the recipe, and then you can modify it, use it however the hell you want to use it. Some people seemed really interested in knowing my Spellcaster and alien deck recipes, and I got a lot of positive feedback about my Spellcaster one, so I figured I would do another one for the alien deck, considering I think I used the alien deck before I even did Spellcaster. So let's talk about the deck a little bit. Basically, this is a really fast-paced, high offensive deck. Like my kind of play style is I just like to be on all the time. The biggest thing here is that if you end up on the defensive with this deck, you're kind of fucked. And I mean, that's just how it ends up. There's a lot of low defense monsters, not a lot of defensive power in this deck. You really have to watch out for being placed on the offensive. It's all about overwhelming your opponent using the combination of all their effects, being able to summon all of them super easy, and combining to get better attack monsters really quickly. And that's basically the premise of this deck, is just focusing on being on all the time. So let's go over some of the cards, right? I have A-Cell Breeding Device, which is the first essential magic card for the deck. It's basically just a way for you to get your A counters out onto the other your opponent's monsters. Jesus, words are hard sometimes. I'm probably going to do that a lot this video. Anyway, every standby phase puts an A counter on it. I'll go over A counters in a second, but they're essential to this deck. All of the monsters are basically useless without the A counters. Right. Next, we have A-Cell Incubator, which basically just saves you an A counter when one loot is lost or used or whatever. Then you can add it to this card, and then once it's destroyed, if you destroy it, if your opponent destroys it, whatever, it gets redistributed amongst all the face-up monsters, so they're back into play. A-Cell Scatterburst is again another way to get A counters out, but you have to sacrifice one of your alien monsters to do so, so it can be useful depending on how you want to use it. If there's a bad equipped card on an alien monster, you want to get rid of it, this is a good way to do it. If you really need those A counters to special summon something, this is another good way to do it. Bird of the Might Eaters, some of you guys know, is one of my favorite spell cards. It's really just in this deck as a staple. It's a good card, unless they have a lot of XYZ monsters, but a lot of the time, Burden of the Mighty is just really good against standard summoned monsters. Code A, Ancient Ruins. Each time a face-up alien monster is destroyed, you can read the description. Really helps you be able to recycle and get your monsters back out fast. Because I said earlier, being on the defensive in this deck is not good. You don't want to be on the defensive. So this helps you, even if you're losing monsters, being able to bring back monsters from the graveyards, special summon them, really get monsters back into play, and then just stay on the offensive. Even if you start taking damage, start being able to use those effects again. Gold Sarcophagus is just another staple card. It's a good way to get out specific monsters, so you can really get your deck rolling. If you're having a hard time getting out A counters, or you need, now that you have A counters, you need specific monsters to be able to summon to get the real effects rolling. Gold Sarcophagus is just a good staple card to have for that kind of situation. Mysterious Triangle. This is a good way to just take out someone on the one of your opponent's monsters, and then it gets you out a little cute little monster that you can do something with. Probably sacrifice. Maybe use Cell Scatterburst after you attack with it, because it dies at the end of the turn. But good way to just pop someone on the other team. I keep wanting to say other team. Your opponent's monster. Overworld, the A Zone is just the field card for an alien deck, which honestly isn't all that necessary. It's a 300 attack and defense difference if they have if you're using an alien monster, which most of the monsters in this deck are. I think actually all of them but Marshmallow are alien. That's actually totally not true. All the XYZ cards aren't alien, so I lied. But anyway, most of the cards are there. It's a good effect with the Synchro Monster, which we'll talk about later in the deck, is that it's another face-up magic card. United We Stand kind of goes without saying. One of the best equipped attack cards in the game, especially for just a standard, any type of deck, works with everything. United We Stand is just a good card. Alien Brain is one of the best trap cards in this deck, if not the best trap card in this deck. It's a really good counter to when, again, you want to stay on the offensive, not be on the defensive in this deck. So if your monster gets destroyed, and if it's a reptile monster, which all of the monsters in this deck should be reptile, except for one or two, you can just take control of the opponent's monster, which means they lose a monster, which one is big, and then two, you get another monster so you can still be on the defensive and you don't have to be worrying about the fact that now your monsters are being destroyed. Very big, very useful. Bottomless Trap Hole also goes without saying, another staple card. Fuck whatever they summon. If it's really strong, get rid of it. One of the biggest things in this deck is being able to take control of your opponent's monsters using the alien effects. Brainwashing Beam is especially helpful in that. Once you really stack a lot of A counters on a specific monster using either like A cell breeding device or whatever the hell it is, you can get a lot of counters on some monsters quickly. Activate Brainwashing Beam and that monster is basically yours. It is for as long as they have A counters on them. And so it loses an A counter at the end of each turn, but if you can just keep piling A counters on it, then you just always get to have it. If you could take control of one of your opponent's like really powerful monsters for this, it's completely worth it and is really effective at just like a big fuck you to your opponent. Damage equal Reptile. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a recurring theme in this deck and staying on the offensive. Damage equal Reptile is anytime one of your like if you lose a reptile monster, you can special summon one from your deck based on how much battle damage you took, which is very useful if, again, all of the alien monsters are reptile type. So if you lose an alien, it's another way for you to get another alien out quickly. Damage equal Reptile, a lot of synchronization with the rest of the deck in this card. And really, this entire deck has got a lot of synchronization to it. Embodiment of whatever the fuck that is. I don't know how to say that word. Aphrosis, or that's what we're going to say it is. Anyway, it's a trap card monster hybrid thing. It's reptile type, so that's useful because you need a lot of reptile types. Maybe you need to sacrifice a reptile. Maybe you need a 4-star reptile for an XYZ summon. What have you. It's just a good standard card for this deck. Another little cute trap card. This is kind of like one of the iffier cards I have in this deck, but I just like it. Mass Hypnosis is another big card in this deck because you can almost take control of your opponent's entire side of the field, up to 3 monsters, which is huge. A lot of the times it's hard to get more than 3 monsters out on the field unless you have a specific deck that's like, I'm going to special summon a bunch of shit. So anyway, you have A counters distributed words are really hard today. Amongst a bunch of your opponent's monsters, take them all, and some of the times this can just be game winning. If you take 3 of their monsters and you have like 2 on the field already, and now you can just get 5 direct attacks in, this alone can win you the game some of the time. Obviously they get the monsters back, but maybe you can sacrifice them during your main phase 2 or whatever. They're in your possession for a whole turn, and so that's really big, and that can really mess your opponent up. I like it a lot. Really useful. Obviously, A counters, very important again in this deck. Mirror Force, I don't need to fucking explain Mirror Force. You know why Mirror Force is in the deck. Offering to the Snake Deity is a good way to really get rid of cards that you need to get rid of fast. There are a lot of disposable reptile monsters in this deck because the entire deck is reptile. And with cards like Alien Brain that make your opponent's monsters reptile once you take control of them, there are a lot of ways to be able to use Offering to the Snake Deity and really mess up your opponent, because getting rid of 2 cards for free is really good, especially without having Mystical Space Typhoon in this deck. This is a really good way to get rid of magic and trap cards or big monsters or whatever the hell you really need to get rid of. This is probably one of the best ways to do it. Orbital Bombardment is another way to get rid of magic and trap cards in this deck. Obviously, every deck needs to have a way to get rid of your opponent's magic and trap cards or deal with them in some way. Orbital Bombardment allows you to trade one of the alien monsters for one of your opponent's magic or trap cards. Pretty useful. Obviously, if a deck's really reliant on a magic or trap card, this is a good way to stop that. Planet Pollutant Virus is basically the alien deck version of Torrential Tribute. I think I said that card right. Maybe that's what it's called. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. You can get rid of one of your alien monsters to wipe your entire opponent's face-up monsters, and then also make sure any new monsters they summon for the next couple turns get A counters on them, which makes them really vulnerable to all of your monsters' effects once they have A counters on them from the get-go. You don't even have to wait a turn for them to already have those counters on them. That's really big for the alien deck, and this is super useful. Obviously, you do have to give up a monster, but I mean, for the value this card brings, it's really pretty much worth it, especially with, again, some of the lower level alien monsters in this deck that you can just get rid of for the effect. Alien Shock Trooper is just kind of the standard, like, assault kind of monster in this deck. It's got 1900 attack for a 4-star monster that's pretty strong by default on its own without even any effects. And because it's 4-star, it's a good way to get out your XYZ monsters or be synchro material, whatever the hell you need it to be. It's just pretty useful to have in the deck with, again, some of the cards I have mentioned later in the deck. Alien Ammonite is the key way to get out the most powerful monster in this deck, the Cosmo something or whatever, the synchro monster. I'll know its name once I get down to it. I forget its name off the top of my head. But anyway, it's the only way you can get out the synchro monster in this deck, which is the most powerful card. You need this guy. He brings back a 4-star monster from the graveyard, or you can bring back some other monster, but you want to bring back the 4-star monster from the graveyard, so make sure you have one in the graveyard to be able to use its effect. It's a free, cheap way to bring out the most powerful monster. Alien Dog is super useful because we talk about always being on the offensive in this deck multiple times. Alien Dog allows you to get another free summon per turn and then also put alien counters on the opponent's monsters. You can special summon him for free anytime you summon another alien monster, which is a good way to just keep the pressure on your opponent by having a bunch of monsters out on the field at the same time. 1500, kind of weak on the attack side, but again, just being able to have a free summon of a bunch of monsters is really useful. Alien Gray is basically one of those monsters I was talking about earlier that's kind of tribute fodder. It's a 2-star monster, which cute, it'll give you, if it gets flipped, it'll give you a counter and a draw, and a free draw, so that's always useful, but relatively low defense and attack, really is just kind of used for fodder for a bunch of the other like tribute reptile effects. Alien Hunter, now we're actually really getting into the like monsters of this deck, right? I have a lot of magic and trap and everything. Alien Hunter is one of the like standard 1600 attack monster, 4-star, pretty basic, except its effect is if they have an A counter, which you should be getting a lot of in this deck, it can attack twice. And again, very overwhelming for your opponent if you have just a regular 4-star monster that's attacking 2 monsters and cutting down your opponent's field, especially if you equipped it with something or give it some effect, or it's getting that A counter bonus that most alien monsters get. Alien Hypno is an effect monster that basically is required to be summoned twice, which is a little bit off sync with the rest of the deck as it kind of slows down the pace because you need to summon it twice to use its effect, but it really takes in the big take control of your opponent's monsters kind of side mission of this deck, really messing up your opponent's momentum and always keeping them off balance and on the defensive. This card will, like, once you special summon it again, to get its effect, you can take control of your opponent's monsters if they have an A counter, and then it's just your monster. It's free, it's yours. And then you don't have, it's not a summon, it's not whatever, really fucks over your opponent, because not only are they, it's not just destroyed, it is yours. You can use it for what tribute, you can use it for whatever the hell you need to use it for. Alien Hypno, pretty strong for a pretty decent level attack, except it's basically a kind of a slowdown for this deck, which is a little unusual. Alien Mars, more often than not, gets kind of used as just, again, what I said is like the tribute fodder for a bunch of other card effects in this deck, because this effect is good, being able to negate your opponent's monsters' effects if they have A counters on them, and they probably should, but it'll also backfire, and it will negate the effects of monsters on your side of the field that have A counters, and if you're trying to get a lot of A counters out in the field for effects, you probably have A counters on your own monsters as well. So he can backfire. A lot of the time it's just good to use him as fodder for the effects and everything else. You can find other ways to use him. You can be cute with him. Sometimes he comes in the clutch. Alien Mother, probably, if anything, is probably the token monster of this deck. Really powerful. It's sacrifice monster. You need to just get rid of one of the other monsters you have in the field. You probably have a lot. If the opponent's monster has an A counter, then again, it's another big way for you to just take your opponent's monster. If you destroy it, then it's yours now, which again is also really big. It's got a pretty decent attack, which means you can take a lot of monsters from your opponent by this monster alone, which is really useful. Really good card, pretty cheap summon, lots of effects, decent attack. Again, it's not like the highest attack. This deck doesn't have like an outrageous attack like number, a lot of attack pressure, but it's all about just overwhelming your opponent because there's a lot of attacks and you're always taking monsters from them and doing that kind of stuff. Alien Overlord is the other big mascot of this deck, except that you don't really need a sacrifice for it. In fact, you probably shouldn't. It's only 2 A counters to just special summon it, which is awesome. You can take them from anywhere on the field. It can be on your monsters, your opponent's monsters, on spell cards, wherever, in play, and then you can just special summon Alien Overlord, which is a pretty powerful 6-star monster, decent attack, and then you can just distribute A counters for free. Like, you can place them against all of your opponent's face-up monsters. I hit the mic, don't pay attention to that. I'll maybe edit that sound out, but since I mentioned it, I probably won't. Whoops. Alien Psychic, again, is another one of those monsters we talked about that is kind of tribute fodder. If they have an A counter, they can't attack. Much like Alien Mars, this effect can also backfire on you. You might not be able to attack if you have this monster out in the field. You mostly just want to use this for effects. Alien Skull is probably one of the most unique monsters in this deck, which is really weird considering a lot of these monsters are super unique and probably not really seen much. You can special summon it to your opponent's side of the field by sacrificing one of their monsters. So if there's something that can't be destroyed by battle, aka Marshmallow, that you just really need to get rid of and you don't have any other way to do it, you can get rid of it for free by giving them Alien Skull, which is kind of counterintuitive to the take back or take control of your opponent's monsters. But it does have an A counter, so maybe you can take it back, or maybe you can use it for an effect, or maybe you can just destroy it. Maybe it will throw your opponent off. It's a very interesting effect that's sometimes very rarely used, but you can use it. And then if you don't, it's one of the only monsters in this deck that has a really decent defense level, so you can use this on the defensive for yourself as well, but you don't want to be on the defensive as much. But Alien Skull is your guy if you need to play something in defense position, and actually have it resist any attack at all. Alien Telepath is basically your monster slash 8-counter way of being able to get rid of magic and trap cards that your opponent has, be it face up or face down. This is your way to deal with magic and trap cards with this deck, is Alien Telepath. You can have more than just one of him in your deck. Maybe you do. I just have one of them. I don't think his effect's that great because Orbital Bombardment's there if you kind of need it. But decent attack level as well, and that's the only way you can really deal with magic and trap cards in this deck. And obviously you're probably going to need to with a lot of decks to just be able to deal with cards like that. Alien Warrior is basically, again, one of your really big face-up attack monsters. 1800 attack, pretty powerful for a 4-star monster, or kind of standard, depending on how you want to look at it. The big thing here is if it gets destroyed by battle, it'll put 2 8 counters on your opponent's monster that destroyed it. Kind of in this deck, that's a death mark if you have 2 counters on it. Or it's a good way to be able to special summon monsters with a lot of the other effects, or just have the effects be used. Being able to put alien counters on the opponent's monster and also have a decent level of attack makes it a really good frontline troop for this deck. Cosmic Horror Alien Word is another one of the powerful monsters in this deck, but it's a little bit different because it's obviously not an alien monster, but it revolves around the one of the core concepts of this deck is taking control of your opponent's monsters. If you do that, you can just sacrifice it with 1 monster instead of 2 because it's 7-star. Has a pretty high attack, and then also lets you just place 8 counters on monsters for free, which is also really useful and helps steamroll things in your favor. Pretty big monster to be able to get out with 1 tribute, and especially if it's at your opponent's expense, especially using things like Mass Hypnosis, where you only get the monster for 1 turn. Flying Saucer Music? That actually might be a weird spelling of musicy. Anyway, this is, again, one of the only defense powers in this deck, and again, why I say it, this is a low defense deck. It's 2,000 defense, and it's a sacrifice for 2,000 defense. But the big thing is, if you do get it on the field, it will hold the line a little bit for you, and will let you get out alien cards that you want specifically right away, which is a good way to get out your Synchro monster for this deck, by getting Alien Omniite out. Marshmelon is in this deck because that's standard for every single deck I make. Marshmelon is the greatest card in the game, and so therefore he is used in my deck, obviously. Razor Lizard is one of the one-off lizards, or one of the one-off reptiles in this deck that's not an alien, but he's got a really useful effect of being able to just destroy defense position monsters that your opponent has. Again, if you're putting on that pressure of always keeping your opponent in the defensive, then being able to just prevent them from summoning monsters in defense position for free, or like for an attack, and no matter what the defense is, it's destroyed, is big. Razor Lizard really helps you put the pressure on once you've put your opponent on their heels on the defensive. Rescue Rabbit is just a kind of a token card for a lot of decks. It's a very easy way to get out any type of XYZ monster that you need, or if you just want one. There are a lot of level 4 monsters in this deck that work well with this, and you have multiple copies of most of your level 4 monsters because there aren't that many alien cards in this game, unfortunately. Hopefully one day they release more alien support, but until then, Rescue Rabbit's really good because you only have a limited number of each of the monsters, and then you have a lot of level 4s, so it's easy to get out XYZ monsters by just using Rescue Rabbit. There for sure is a way to do that with every monster in the game, or in this deck, not game. Snipe Hunter is kind of the unique card in this deck, just because, other than Marshmelon, just because it's not any way related to defense power or reptile or anything like that. It's just got a really powerful effect with a decent attack. Discarding a card, this allows you to deal with monsters that are too high of attack, or allows you to deal with magic and trap cards, however you want to see fit. Snipe Hunter is just really useful. Venominion, the king of poisonous snakes. I'm pretty sure I said that name wrong, but that's okay. I mispronounce things all the time on this channel. It's almost like it's my side job. Anyway, this is kind of one of the low-key power monsters in this deck because it gains power for 500 attack specifically for every reptile monster in your graveyard. Every monster in this deck is reptile except for Marshmelon and Snipe Hunter. So basically, and Rescue Rabbit. So anything in your graveyard is powering up this serpent. So late game, if you've like played this duel last till like both of you are at like 10 cards left or whatever, if you summon the king of poisonous snakes, he's gonna be really fucking strong. And then he's also really hard to get rid of because you can just banish one of those cards to bring him back out on the field. And none of the cards in this deck have anything to do with banishing monsters. So everything is going to be in your graveyard. Unless your opponent is banishing your monsters, you have a full graveyard of effects to use, or of reptile monsters willing to be used. And anytime something dies, it continues to power this monster up. He can be really powerful late game or just low-key powerful in a way your opponent's not going to expect with this deck. We've got Utopia in this deck just because I have a limited number of XYZ cards to pick from in this game. He's one of the few I know. He's pretty standard. Decent effect, decent attack power. You guys probably know of him. There are a couple level 3 monsters in this deck that are pretty good, but I don't have very many like level 3 reptile XYZ monsters, so it's just a standard XYZ 3-star monster. Decent attack, decent effect. Again, kind of the same story. Number 17 also literally has the exact same description. Sorry, nothing fancy about Leviathan Dragon. Silent Horror Arc, also the same kind of description as Utopia. Standard XYZ monster, pretty good effect, pretty good attack. King of the Feral Imps now has a little bit of a usefulness and a little bit of synchronization with the deck. Kind of the preferred 4-star monster if you can get him out. He lets, using his XYZ material effect, or you can add any monster from your deck to your hand because all of your monsters are reptile, so he's got a lot of utility in being able to bring out more monsters to really help you out. He's pretty useful and probably one of the best XYZ cards in this deck. Gemini Pearl just has a decent attack. Maybe you need that attack power. Don't know. Use all 15 cards in your extra deck. You can swap these out for anything, but these are the ones I put in. Evil Swarm Knight, again, same kind of thing. Not really much detail to go into. This video is getting kind of long. Good effect, good attack, pretty easy to get out. Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, again, same kind of effect, sorry. Constellar Hades is just a useful level 3 light monster. Most of the level 3 monsters in this deck are light, so it's not hard to get him out, especially if you just special summon a bunch of alien dogs. Free way to get him out. Pretty good synchronization with Alien Dog because he's easy to summon. Constellar M7 is just for Constellar Hades. That's literally the only reason in the deck is because it's another cheap way to power him up really fast. Castle the Skybuster Musketeer, just a staple card, pretty useful, has a decent effect, decent attack. Battle Cruiser, we already went over this again. Last but not least, Cosmic Fortress Golgar is the token monster of this deck. It's the most powerful card in this deck. You want to be getting this baby out. Once you get him out, it's really hard to stop him. He has a chain effect where you can bring back all of the cards that you have face up on the field into your hand. Then you can be placing A counters on the field based on how many face-up cards that you just sent back to either your hand or your opponent's hand, which is a good way to just stop them from playing cards. Really useful. And then you can destroy a monster by just removing 2 A counters, which, again, this card makes it really easy to get out A counters everywhere. And then you can also just replay all the cards that you brought back to your hand that turn. If they're like face-up spell cards, if you have a face-up field card, boom, place it again. Next turn, you just keep placing on the field, bringing it back to your hand. Placing it on the field, bringing it back to your hand. Keep spamming A counters everywhere. Really good synchronization with the rest of the deck because obviously a lot of the other aliens are very dependent on A counters. It's got a really high attack and okay defense, but it's, again, pretty weak in the defense category. But it is the most powerful monster in this deck just because of that effect and just because it's a cute little synchro summon. But that is it, you guys. That is the basis of my alien deck. I've got a lot of comments for a recipe for it, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I liked discussing this deck. I enjoy using this deck a lot, and so I hope you enjoy using it as well if you have the cards in the deck. Feel free to post in the comments what other decks I should use, go over, all that kind of stuff. And let me know if you use your own variation of the alien deck or if I've inspired you to use it or if you now copy my recipe, which I hope you do. And I hope you have great success with it. And I also hope you follow me on Twitter and Twitch in the links below in the description or whatever. And then you share and subscribe this video and let other people know that I use an alien deck and they can make fun of me that this deck is probably really poorly formed. And they know a million better ways to make the alien deck. I'm sure they do. But above all else, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you around. Bye.